The fire raged on, swallowing my house and car. The heat was unbearable, and the flames danced like angry spirits, crackling and popping in every direction. I could see the smoke rising into the night sky, thick and black, as if the whole world was about to burn. But what stunned me the most wasn't the fire. It was the cold, hard truth I was about to uncover. They said she died in the fire. I overheard them whispering, their voices laced with fear. She was trapped inside. There was nothing anyone could do. I couldn't believe my ears. They were talking about my sister, Clara. My heart stopped for a moment, but it wasn't because of the flames. It was because I knew something they didn't. I knew I had seen it all unfold, and I had it all on film. Every single second of the fire. I was in the garage, hidden away, recording everything as it happened. Suddenly, the thought struck me, what if they weren't planning to let Clara die at all? What if this was all part of their plan, an elaborate scheme for insurance money? My hands trembled as I replayed the events in my mind. What had I gotten myself into? But just as the truth began to settle in, I heard someone approach. The sound of footsteps echoed through the smoke-filled air. Someone was coming for me. The rush of panic hit me again. Should I run? Should I call the police? I was caught in a web of lies, and I didn't know if I could get out. But the most important question was, what would they do when they found out I had proof? I needed to decide fast. It all started a few weeks ago. The day Clara called me, her voice sounding more strained than usual, was when things began to go downhill. Clara and I had always been close, even though we lived on opposite sides of the country. We used to spend hours on the phone, talking about everything from childhood memories to what we were having for dinner. But on that day, her voice was different, shaky, uncertain. She had called to ask me to come over, to stay with her for a while. She said there was something wrong, but she wouldn't explain. Just get here as soon as you can, please, Clara begged. I didn't hesitate for a second. I packed my bags and booked the first flight I could find. When I arrived at her house, Clara seemed fine, at least on the outside. But there was an eerie tension in the air, something I couldn't quite place. The house was too quiet, and the front door was slightly ajar, like it had been left that way in a hurry. As I walked inside, I noticed that some of her furniture had been moved around, and the living room looked different, almost too perfect, as though it had been staged for some unknown reason. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice filled with concern. Clara didn't look at me. Instead, she walked into the kitchen, her back turned to me, and started to prepare a cup of tea. "I don't know," she muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. "Something isn't right, and I can't explain it. Just stay with me for a while, okay?" I nodded, though I didn't fully understand. But deep down, I felt that something was wrong. The unease settled in my gut like a stone, and it wasn't long before I realized that Clara had been keeping secrets that had begun to unfold in the most unexpected and dangerous way. Days passed, and Clara kept to herself more and more. We rarely spoke, and when we did, she seemed distant, as if she were hiding something. I tried to ask her what was going on, but she would always deflect the question, saying she just needed time to think. One evening, after a long day of awkward silence between us, Clara called me into her room. She had a strange look in her eyes, something I hadn't seen before. A look of fear mixed with determination. "Stay in the garage tonight," she told me, her voice trembling. "I don't want you anywhere near the house. Just trust me." I was confused, but I didn't question her. I did as she asked and locked myself in the garage, not knowing what to expect. That night, I decided to record what was happening, just in case. My phone's camera was running as I sat in the darkness of the garage, waiting for anything to happen. And then it did. Suddenly, the sound of tires screeching outside filled the air. The front door slammed open, and I could hear voices, low, angry whispers, followed by the unmistakable sound of fire starting. I couldn't believe my eyes as I saw Clara's car go up in flames. The fire spread so quickly that I couldn't even process what was happening. It wasn't long before the house was engulfed in flames too. I could feel the heat through the walls of the garage, and I instinctively ducked down, hoping to stay hidden. But as I watched, I noticed something strange. Clara wasn't outside. She wasn't anywhere near the fire. In fact, I realized she wasn't even in the house. She had been gone before the fire started. I'd been played. My heart pounded in my chest as the realization hit me like a wave. They were trying to make it look like she had died in the fire. But I had the proof. I kept the camera rolling, documenting every moment. I was no longer just a bystander, I was a witness. But what would happen if they found out I had captured everything? What if they came after me next? The question swirled in my mind as I heard the fire trucks approaching. And then, as if on cue, I saw them, two figures emerging from the smoke. They didn't look surprised. They didn't look worried. They looked pleased. The two figures slowly emerged from the smoke, their silhouettes becoming clearer as the flames continued to rage behind them. I could hardly believe my eyes. One of them was Greg, Clara's ex-husband, and the other was someone I didn't recognize, a tall, intimidating man in a black jacket. They walked toward the burning wreckage of the house without a hint of panic. I crouched down low in the garage, my heart racing in my chest. My phone was still recording, hidden behind the workbench, but I could feel the weight of the moment. They couldn't know I was watching. They couldn't know I had captured everything. But deep down, I knew they'd be looking for something, or someone, me. Greg stopped just outside the house, his face illuminated by the orange glow of the flames. He seemed too calm, almost too rehearsed, like he was in control of the situation. His voice was steady, even though I knew the fire could destroy everything they'd worked so hard to hide. "Is everything in place?" Greg asked the tall man. His words sounded rehearsed, as if they'd done this before. The man nodded, his face unreadable. "We're good. She's gone. No one will know it was us." I almost choked on my breath. She's gone. They were talking about Clara, and they were making it sound like her death was a sure thing. But I knew better now. Clara wasn't in that house, and she wasn't dead. This was all part of their twisted plan. I swallowed hard and forced myself to keep the camera rolling. If they knew I had witnessed this, if they knew I had filmed them, I would be in real danger. I didn't know what they were planning next, but I couldn't risk being discovered. Greg glanced around nervously before turning to the man. "Make sure the insurance papers are ready. We need this to look good. If anyone asks, we were all inside. The fire was just a freak accident." "Understood," the man replied. His voice was deep and emotionless, like he wasn't even fazed by the destruction around him. They didn't speak for a few moments, the only sound coming from the crackling of the fire. And the distant wail of sirens. I could feel the weight of the truth pressing down on me. The truth that Clara had been caught up in something much bigger than just a bad relationship. She had been a pawn in this dangerous game. Suddenly, Greg turned toward the garage. My stomach dropped. My heart skipped a beat. He was looking directly at the door. I froze, holding my breath. My fingers were clenched tightly around the phone. Could he see me? Could he sense that I was watching? The tall man turned, following Greg's gaze. They both stared at the garage door, and for a moment, I thought I would be caught. But just as quickly, Greg dismissed it with a wave of his hand. "It's fine. Just make sure the fire burns long enough," he said, his tone casual as if the flames were nothing more than a small inconvenience. The two men turned and walked away, disappearing into the smoke. I let out the breath I had been holding for what seemed like an eternity. I was still alive. They hadn't found me, but I was also more afraid than I had ever been in my life. I knew I had to get out of the garage, but I couldn't leave yet. The fire trucks were coming closer, and I needed to stay hidden until I knew what they would do next. But what was next? What was their plan after the fire? I needed to think quickly. I closed my phone and tucked it into my pocket. Slowly, cautiously, I opened the garage door just a crack. The cool night air hit my face, and I could hear the distant voices of firefighters and the whirring of their trucks. The smoke was still thick, but I could make out the flashing red and blue lights. I decided it was time to leave the garage. I couldn't risk being caught there, so I grabbed my bag and crept out into the yard, making my way toward the fence. The last thing I wanted was to be anywhere near Greg and his accomplice when the firefighters started asking questions. They didn't need to know I was still here. But just as I was about to climb the fence, I heard a noise behind me. Footsteps. They were getting closer. I spun around in a panic, my heart racing. Someone was coming. I barely had time to hide behind a tree before a figure stepped into view. It was Greg. He was walking slowly, scanning the yard, his eyes darting around like he was looking for something, or someone. I held my breath and stayed as still as possible, hoping he wouldn't spot me. My mind was spinning. What was he doing here? Why wasn't he with the other man? Had he come back to check something? Or was he looking for me? The sound of his footsteps grew louder, and I realized he was heading straight for the tree I was hiding behind. My body tensed, and I prayed he wouldn't notice the slight movement of the branches. He stopped right in front of me. I could hear his breathing, and I felt like my heart was going to explode in my chest. "Clara," Greg called out quietly, almost as if he were whispering to himself. My blood ran cold. Was he calling Clara? Was he expecting her to appear out of the shadows? Had he known all along that she wasn't in the house? I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. I was trapped. Then, just when I thought he would discover me, he turned and walked away. He didn't see me. He didn't know I was there. But I wasn't safe yet. I needed to get out of here. Fast. With one last glance at Greg, I ran toward the back gate and slipped through. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears as I ran down the dark alley, away from the smoke, away from the fire, and away from the man who had burned my life to the ground. But I knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. And I was about to find out that escaping this nightmare wasn't as simple as running away. I ran as fast as I could, the alleyway stretching ahead like a dark, endless tunnel. My breath came in ragged gasps, and my legs burned with every step. My mind raced, not just with fear, but with questions. What had just happened? Why had they set the fire? Why had they tried to make it look like Clara was dead? And, most terrifying of all, what were they planning to do next? I could still hear the fire trucks in the distance, the shrill sirens cutting through the night, but I didn't dare slow down. I had no plan, no idea where to go, but I knew I couldn't stay near that house. I couldn't risk being seen again. As I turned a corner, I spotted a small, dimly lit convenience store at the end of the block. It looked like the kind of place that stayed open all night, the flickering neon sign offering a false sense of comfort. I headed toward it, hoping to catch my breath and figure out what to do next. Inside, the store was empty, save for the clerk who sat behind the counter, his eyes glued to the TV screen. I walked past the aisles of snacks and drinks, my heart still pounding from the adrenaline. My hands shook as I grabbed a bottle of water and paid for it quickly, not daring to look the clerk in the eye. I knew I couldn't stay here long. It was too risky, but I needed a moment. I needed to think. I walked toward the back of the store, hoping to find a quiet corner where I could collect myself. But as I turned the corner, I froze. There, standing by the payphone, was Clara. My heart stopped. I felt like the ground beneath me had just disappeared. For a moment, everything went silent, the noise of the store fading into the background. Clara was standing there, looking exactly like she had the day I left. She looked different, more guarded, like someone who had been through something she couldn't talk about. She saw me and froze too, her eyes widening in shock. Then, without a word, she turned and began to walk toward the door. "Clara," I called out, rushing to catch up to her. "What's going on? What happened? Why didn't you tell me you were okay?" I thought. "I can't talk to you right now," Clara interrupted, her voice low, tense. She glanced around nervously, her eyes darting to the door, as if someone might be watching us. "What are you talking about? I've been looking for you. I saw the fire, Clara. You weren't in the house, and now you're here, but—" "Shish, not here," she hissed, looking over her shoulder again. "Meet me at the old diner on 5th Street in an hour. Don't tell anyone where you're going. It's too dangerous. Just trust me." And with that, she was gone. She didn't even look back as she disappeared out the door, leaving me standing there with more questions than answers. The old diner on 5th Street. Why there? And what was Clara involved in? I stood there, completely stunned. What was going on? Why did she look so scared? Why had she disappeared when I'd come to find her? And what did she mean by, "it's too dangerous"? I felt a sense of urgency wash over me. I didn't want to wait for another minute. I needed to understand everything, to make sense of the twisted mess Clara had gotten herself into. But most of all, I needed to make sure she was safe. I left the store, my feet moving faster now, toward the diner. It wasn't far, just a few blocks away. I tried to keep my mind focused on getting there, but I couldn't stop thinking about the fire. What if the people behind it had figured out that Clara wasn't dead? What if they were after her now? As I reached the diner, I noticed the lights were dim. The sign outside flickered, the neon letters barely visible in the night. It looked abandoned, like it hadn't been open in years. I hesitated for a moment, but then pushed open the door. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of stale coffee and grease. A single table near the back was lit by a dim bulb hanging from the ceiling. Clara was sitting there, her hands wrapped tightly around a cup of coffee. Her eyes were locked on the door, her face tense with worry. She looked up as I entered, relief flashing across her face, but it was quickly replaced by fear. "Sit down, quick," she whispered urgently. "They might be following you." I sat down across from her, my pulse quickening. "Clara, what's going on? Why did you run? Why did you?" "I didn't run," she interrupted, her voice strained. "I had to disappear. You don't understand, but I'm doing this to keep you safe. I've been involved in something dangerous. Something I shouldn't have gotten involved in. And now, it's too late." My mind raced. Dangerous. Too late. "Clara, what do you mean? Who's after you? Who's after us?" She shook her head, her eyes filled with regret. "Greg. I got mixed up with him again. I didn't know what he was planning, but now it's gone too far. They're trying to get insurance money, and they'll do anything to make it happen. I thought they wanted me to disappear, but now I know, they want more than that." "More?" I asked, confusion flooding my mind. "What do you mean? What's their endgame?" Clara took a deep breath, her hands trembling. "I don't know, but I'm scared. They have connections. They can make things happen. If we don't stop them now, they'll come for both of us." I felt a chill run down my spine. I didn't fully understand the gravity of what Clara was saying, but I knew one thing for sure, this wasn't over. The fire, the lies, the secrets, it was all part of something much bigger than either of us. And as Clara looked at me with pleading eyes, I knew that this was just the beginning. Whatever came next, I had to stick by her. But I had no idea just how deep the web of lies went. I only knew that we were both in too deep to turn back now. Suddenly, the door to the diner swung open. The bell above it jingled loudly, and both Clara and I turned instinctively. A figure stood there, silhouetted in the doorway. They were wearing a dark coat, and their face was hidden in the shadows. I froze. This wasn't just a coincidence. This was someone who was after us. I felt my stomach drop as the figure stepped into the diner. The figure stepped into the diner, their footsteps echoing through the empty space. The low hum of the neon lights flickered, casting strange shadows on the walls. Clara's hand tightened around her coffee cup, her knuckles turning white as she watched the newcomer approach. I could feel my heart thumping in my chest, and every nerve in my body screamed at me to run. But there was nowhere to run. The figure took a step closer, and I could make out more details now. They were tall, dressed in a long black coat, their face hidden beneath a dark hood. The air in the diner felt heavier, charged with tension. I had no idea who this person was, but from the way Clara was acting, I could tell that this wasn't good. "Clara," the figure spoke, their voice cold and smooth, like ice scraping against glass. "I knew you'd show up here. You always make things harder than they need to be." Clara flinched at the sound of the voice, and her face drained of color. She looked like she had seen a ghost. Her eyes met mine, but they were filled with fear, not the usual calm I had come to expect from her. "Leave us alone, Leo," Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This isn't what you think it is." Leo. The name rang a bell, but I couldn't place it. Who was he? And why was Clara so terrified of him? "Not what I think." Leo's voice dripped with amusement, but there was a dark edge to it. "You've been playing both sides, Clara. You think I don't know what you've been up to. You think I don't know you're trying to sabotage the plan." Clara stood up abruptly, pushing her chair back with a loud screech. It's not like that, she exclaimed. I didn't want any of this to happen. I didn't know how deep this was. I was just trying to get out. Leo took a slow step forward, and for a moment, I thought he might attack. His eyes locked on Clara, but then he turned to me, his gaze sharp and calculating. "And who's this?" Leo asked, his tone suddenly more interested. "Is this the one you've been hiding from me, Clara? The one who's been snooping around, filming everything?" I froze. My heart skipped a beat. How did he know about the video? How did he know I had been recording? Had someone seen me at the house? Clara's face went pale as she turned toward me. "No, he's not involved. He doesn't know anything. Please, Leo, just leave him out of this." Leo's lips curled into a smirk, his eyes narrowing. "You really think I'm going to believe that? You think I'm just going to walk away because you say so?" He took another step toward us, his presence overwhelming. I could feel the tension in the air like a physical weight pressing down on me. Every instinct in my body told me to get out of there, but I couldn't move. I had no idea what Leo wanted, or what he was capable of. "Clara," Leo said softly, his voice suddenly quieter, more dangerous. "You've made a mistake. And now, I have to clean up your mess. You think you can just run away from me? From what we've built together?" I could see Clara's body tremble as she backed away, her face a mask of fear and regret. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I just wanted to be free." Leo's eyes darkened, his lips curling into a cruel smile. "Free? You think you can just walk away from everything? From me?" Suddenly, the door to the diner slammed open again, and both Clara and I turned instinctively. This time, it wasn't just anyone. A tall, broad-shouldered man stepped inside, his face shadowed by the brim of a baseball cap. He looked like someone who didn't belong in a quiet diner at this time of night. Leo's face hardened when he saw the man. His smile faded, and I could feel the shift in the room. The atmosphere grew even more tense, like we were standing at the edge of a cliff, one step away from a fall. "Alex," Leo said, his voice filled with an icy calm. "What are you doing here?" The man, Alex, didn't answer right away. He just stood there, his gaze flicking between Leo and Clara. There was something in his eyes that made me uneasy. He wasn't here to help. I could tell. "I came to make sure things went according to plan," Alex said finally, his voice low but firm. "And it looks like you've got a little problem on your hands, Leo." Leo's jaw clenched, but he didn't say anything. Instead, he stepped back, crossing his arms over his chest. "You're not in charge here, Alex. Don't forget that." Alex took a step closer to the table, his gaze shifting to Clara. "I think you're forgetting who's really in charge," he said. "Clara's out. It's time to cut our losses." Clara's eyes widened, her breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. "What do you mean, out?" she asked, her voice trembling. I haven't done anything wrong. You were part of the plan," Alex said coldly. "But now, you're a liability. And Leo's not going to let that slide." I could see the fear in Clara's eyes as she turned to me, her face pale and strained. I didn't want this. I didn't know how dangerous it all was. My mind was spinning. I was completely in the dark about what was going on, but I could tell that Clara had gotten herself mixed up with some dangerous people who were not afraid to hurt anyone who got in their way. I didn't want to believe it, but I was starting to understand. Whatever Leo and Alex were planning, it was bigger than anything I had imagined. Leo turned back to Alex, his voice dripping with anger. "You're messing everything up. She's part of this. I'll handle it, okay?" Alex's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, he seemed genuinely angry. "No, it's too late. You're not in control anymore, Leo. You're not the one calling the shots." There was a long silence, the tension between the two men palpable. Clara and I sat frozen in our seats, too terrified to move. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me, but I couldn't understand why things were happening so fast. Suddenly, Alex's voice cut through the silence. "Get up," he said to Clara, his tone sharp. "We're leaving. Now." I stood up, my legs shaking beneath me. "What do you mean, leaving? What's going on?" But Alex didn't answer. Instead, he reached out and grabbed Clara's arm, pulling her toward the door. I didn't know what to do, but I couldn't just let her go. I couldn't let her be dragged off by these people without understanding what was happening. Clara, I called, my voice desperate. What's going on? Please, tell me. Clara's eyes flicked to mine for a brief moment, and in that instant, I saw the truth. She was terrified. She had no control over the situation. And worse, she didn't know how to stop it. But then, before I could take a step forward, Leo spoke, his voice cold and final. Let her go, he said quietly. She's made her choice. Clara was gone. Just like that. And I was left standing in the diner, unsure of what to do next. The door slammed shut behind her, and I was left alone with Leo and Alex. What had just happened? And where was Clara going? I didn't have the answers, but one thing was certain, this wasn't over. It had only just begun. I stood frozen in the diner, the echoes of the door slamming shut still ringing in my ears. Clara had been dragged away, her fate uncertain, and I was left in the thick of this nightmare with Leo and Alex. My heart hammered in my chest, and I could feel the heat rising in my face, my blood boiling with anger, fear, and confusion. I had to do something. I couldn't just sit here while Clara was taken by these people. But I had no idea what I was up against. Leo stepped closer to me, his gaze cold, calculating. You should have stayed out of this, he said, his voice quiet but deadly. But now you're involved, and there's no turning back. My mind raced. I had to figure out how to get to Clara, how to stop this madness. But I couldn't do it alone. I had to think. I had to plan. Where are they taking her? I demanded, my voice shaking with a mixture of fear and anger. What are you doing to her? Leo smirked, unfazed by my outburst. You really think you can stop this? You're just a bystander, a nuisance. The plan's already in motion. Clara's just a small part of it now. My pulse quickened. What plan? What do you want from her? Leo's eyes narrowed, but he didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked over at Alex, who had been standing silently by the door, watching us. The tension in the room was thick, and for a moment, I thought Leo might say something more. But then he simply shrugged and turned back to me. You don't need to know, Leo said, his voice dripping with disdain. What matters now is that you keep quiet. You don't have a say in this anymore. It's out of your hands. I felt a knot form in my stomach. This wasn't just about insurance money anymore. Something much darker was happening, something I wasn't prepared for. Clara had been caught in it, and now I was too. There was no escaping this web of lies and deceit. As Leo and Alex stood there, their faces unreadable, I couldn't help but feel a rising sense of desperation. I had to find a way to get Clara back. But how? And where was she now? Suddenly, my phone buzzed in my pocket, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. I fumbled to pull it out, my hands shaking. I glanced at the screen, expecting some sort of emergency message, but what I saw made my blood run cold. It was a message from Clara. Don't come after me. It's too dangerous. They'll kill us both. Trust me, it's over. The words on the screen blurred as my eyes filled with tears. Clara was telling me to give up, to walk away. But I couldn't. I couldn't let her disappear into whatever nightmare Leo and Alex were dragging her into. But then I remembered something Clara had said before. They'll kill us both. The words repeated in my mind, and I suddenly realized the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just about money. It was about power, control, and a plan that was much bigger than Clara and me. And now I was tangled in it, whether I liked it or not. I couldn't afford to be reckless. I had to think carefully if I was going to save Clara. But at that moment, I didn't have a plan. I didn't even know where to begin. Leo's voice broke through my thoughts. You've been a problem from the start. And now, I'm done being patient. Before I could respond, he motioned for Alex, who stepped forward, his gaze locked on me. You should have listened, Leo said, his voice cold. But now you've crossed a line. There's no going back. I didn't know what they were going to do next, but I could feel the danger rising. My chest tightened with panic, and I had to think fast. I glanced around the diner, searching for anything that could help me. But all I saw was an old, empty building, a place that once might have been filled with the warmth of coffee and the chatter of strangers. Now it felt like a prison, a place where my worst fears were coming true. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from the front of the diner, followed by the sound of tires screeching. My heart skipped a beat. What was happening now? Leo and Alex turned toward the noise, their faces hardening. "Looks like you're not the only one with backup," Leo muttered, his tone sharp. He glanced at Alex, who was already moving toward the door. I didn't have time to think. I bolted for the back exit, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know who was coming, but I couldn't let Leo or Alex catch me. I burst out of the diner and into the alley, my feet pounding against the cold pavement. I glanced over my shoulder and saw Leo and Alex following close behind. They were gaining on me. Then, I heard a car engine roar to life. It was a car I didn't recognize, but it was heading straight for me. I didn't know what to expect, but the car was coming fast, its headlights blinding. Just as I reached the corner, the car swerved, screeching to a halt right in front of me. I skidded to a stop, barely avoiding the front bumper. The door swung open, and a familiar face appeared. It was Clara. She was alive, and she was here to help. I didn't hesitate. I jumped into the car without a second thought, slamming the door behind me. Clara floored the accelerator, and we shot down the street, leaving Leo and Alex in the dust. But I knew this wasn't the end. Leo and Alex weren't the kind of people who gave up easily. And I had no doubt they would come after us. As we sped through the dark streets, Clara's hands gripped the wheel tightly. Her face was a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "I didn't want to drag you into this," she said, her voice quiet. "But now it's too late. They won't stop until they get what they want." I looked at Clara, trying to steady my breathing. I didn't know what was coming next, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to give up. Not now. Not after everything that had happened. We were running, yes. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Clara glanced at me, her eyes filled with determination. "We're not done. We have a long way to go." And I knew, deep down, she was right. This was only the beginning. The plan was still unfolding, and there was much more to uncover. But whatever happened next, I would be with Clara. We would face whatever came our way, together. The car roared through the dark streets, the headlights cutting through the thick, quiet night. Clara's hands gripped the wheel so tightly her knuckles were white, her jaw clenched with determination. I could feel the tension radiating from her, a mixture of fear and defiance that I knew all too well. She wasn't just running away anymore, she was running toward something. But what? What was she hoping to find at the end of this road? The screech of tires in the distance reminded me that we weren't free yet. Leo and Alex wouldn't give up that easily. They were coming for us. I couldn't shake the thought that this would end in something worse than we could ever imagine. "Clara, where are we going?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Clara didn't answer right away. She kept her eyes on the road, her expression hard, almost distant. After a long moment, she spoke, her voice strained but steady. "We need to go to the old cabin in the woods. It's the only place they won't find us. It's where I used to hide when I needed to get away from all this, from them." I nodded, though the thought of hiding in an old cabin deep in the woods didn't exactly bring me comfort. It felt like running away, like hiding from the very thing we needed to face. But Clara had been in this mess much longer than I had. If she thought it was the safest option, I had no choice but to trust her. The road ahead seemed endless, the occasional streetlight flickering as we passed, casting fleeting shadows over the car. My mind kept racing. What was Leo and Alex's plan? What were they really after? It wasn't just the insurance money anymore. There was something bigger, something more dangerous behind all of this. "We're not safe yet," Clara said, her voice cutting through my thoughts. "Not until we get to the cabin. We're going to have to be careful. Leo has people everywhere, people who will do anything to make sure this goes according to his plan." "Then why did you get involved with him?" I asked before I could stop myself, the words slipping out before I realized how sharp they sounded. Clara's grip tightened on the wheel, but she didn't flinch. "I didn't know, okay. I didn't know what he was really about. At first, he seemed like a way out. I thought I could get him to help me get away from my past. But now," her voice trailed off, and for a moment, I saw the vulnerability in her eyes. "Now, I see that I made a huge mistake. I got caught up in something I couldn't control. I wanted to say something comforting, but the truth was, I didn't know how. I was in the same situation, caught up in a web of lies, fear, and betrayal. Clara had been trying to escape this nightmare for years, and now, I was right there beside her. The drive seemed to drag on forever, the minutes stretching into hours. But finally, the car slowed as we reached the edge of the woods. The trees loomed tall and dark, their branches swaying in the wind like silent sentinels. Clara turned onto a narrow dirt road that wound through the forest, the car bumping over uneven ground. "We're almost there," Clara said, her voice more distant than before. "Just stay quiet. Don't make a sound." I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. I was beginning to understand why Clara had chosen this place, it was the perfect hiding spot. But it also felt like the last place we could hide for long. Leo and Alex wouldn't stop until they got what they wanted. And we didn't know what they were really after. The cabin finally came into view, nestled between the trees like a forgotten relic of the past. It was small, weathered, and run down, with a single light glowing weakly from the inside. Clara parked the car in front of it and turned off the engine, the sound of the engine dying in the stillness of the woods. "This is it," she said softly. "We'll be safe here for a while. But we need to figure out what's next." I looked out at the dark, silent woods. It was peaceful, almost too peaceful for what we were about to face. But it wouldn't last. Nothing ever did. As we got out of the car and approached the cabin, I heard the faint sound of footsteps behind us. My breath caught in my throat. Someone was coming. I turned quickly, my eyes scanning the darkness. And then I saw him. Leo. He emerged from the trees, his tall figure silhouetted against the moonlight. He wasn't alone. Alex was with him, walking just a few steps behind, both of them looking as calm and collected as ever. "You really thought you could run away, Clara?" Leo called out, his voice carrying through the night air. Clara stopped in her tracks, her back stiffening. I could see the fear in her eyes, but she didn't show it. She stood tall, facing him head-on. "I'm not running from you anymore, Leo," she said, her voice steady. "I'm done." Leo chuckled darkly, his eyes narrowing. "You're done when I say you're done. You and your little friend here have no idea what you've gotten yourselves into." I could feel my heart racing as Leo took another step forward, his gaze shifting between Clara and me. He was closer now, his presence intimidating, but I couldn't back down. I couldn't let him take Clara again. Not after everything we'd been through. "This is it, Leo," Clara said, her voice trembling but strong. "I'm done being your pawn. Whatever you've planned, it's over. We're not going to let you control us anymore." Leo's smile faded, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of something, rage, maybe, or fear. But it was gone before I could be sure. "You think it's over?" Leo sneered. "You think you can just walk away? You have no idea what I'm capable of." Before I could react, Leo raised his hand, and for a brief moment, everything seemed to stop. Then, in a blur of movement, Clara lunged forward, pushing me behind her, just as the sound of gunshots rang out. The world exploded in chaos. My heart stopped as I saw Clara stumble back, blood trickling from her side. "No!" I screamed, rushing forward, but Clara held up her hand to stop me. "I'm fine," she gasped, her face pale but determined. "It's just a scratch. But this isn't over." The pain in her voice was unmistakable. But something had changed in her. She wasn't just running anymore. She was fighting back. Leo and Alex were still there, their faces hard, but I could see the doubt in their eyes now. They hadn't expected this. But neither had I. And now, the game was about to change. Clara turned toward me, her eyes full of fire. "It's not over. Not by a long shot." And as I looked at her, standing tall despite everything, I knew that whatever happened next, we would face it together. There was no turning back now. The battle for our lives had just begun.